The conference room was on the 31st floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows. Downtown Chicago spread below as a circuit board lit from underneath. The kind of view that was supposed to make people feel important simply by being in proximity to it. The kind of room where decisions got made and careers advanced, and the particular machinery of corporate ambition operated at its most visible. I had been in that room exactly once before. My first week at Caldwell Financial Group 18 months earlier, during an orientation tour that had moved so quickly I barely registered the details. Now, I was sitting at the long table with 11 other people, watching my boss, Marcus Webb, arrange his notes at the head of the table like a man settling into a throne he considered his rightfully. My notes. The presentation on the screen behind him. The slides I had spent 4 months building, the analysis I had run across 600 hours of work, the strategic recommendation that had required me to learn 3 new modeling methodologies and rebuild my approach twice from scratch before the framework finally held. Had Marcus Webb's name in the header, not mine. I had noticed that at 7:45 this morning, when Marcus had sent the final deck to the board distribution list, and I had opened my copy and seen his name where mine should have been and understood in the particular clear way you understand things when you have been naive about something and the naivety has just been corrected. That Marcus Webb had no intention of sharing credit for the Meridian portfolio analysis with anyone, least of all the 29-year-old analyst who had actually produced it. I sat at the table, I kept my face neutral, and I thought about the email. The one I had sent 8 weeks earlier. My name is Claire Nakamura, and I am 29 years old, and I am good at my work. I want to say that plainly because the story that follows requires it as context, not arrogance, simply accuracy. I am a financial analyst at Caldwell Financial Group in Chicago, and I am good at what I do in the specific measurable way that financial analysis permits. The numbers either hold or they don't. The models either predict accurately or they don't. The recommendations either produce returns or they don't. Mine hold. Mine predict. Mine produce. I had joined Caldwell 18 months earlier after 3 years at a smaller firm in Minneapolis where I had been excellent but insufficiently visible and had understood that the next stage of my career required a larger platform. Caldwell was that platform. A mid-sized investment management firm with significant institutional clients and a reputation for rigorous analysis that had attracted me specifically. Marcus Webb was my direct manager. He was 44, polished, the kind of man who moved through professional environments with the ease of someone who had learned early that confidence presented correctly was indistinguishable from competence to most audiences. He was good at relationships. At the particular social architecture of corporate environments, the lunches and the golf and the board-level conversations that built the kind of institutional trust that analysis alone couldn't purchase. He was less good at analysis. I understood this within my first month, not because he was incompetent. He wasn't. Because the gap between his presentation of his analytical capabilities and their actual depth was consistent and visible to anyone paying close attention. I paid close attention. I also did excellent work and kept my head down and assumed that excellence would be recognized through normal channels because I was 29 and had not yet fully learned that institutional recognition does not automatically follow institutional contribution. The Meridian portfolio analysis changed that understanding completely. The project had been assigned to Marcus in September. Caldwell had a significant position in the Meridian Real Estate Investment Trust, a complex multi-sector portfolio that had been underperforming relative to benchmarks for 18 months, and whose board was requesting a comprehensive strategic analysis and recommendation from Caldwell's investment management team. Marcus had been tasked with leading the analysis. He had tasked me with producing it. This was normal. Managers assigned analytical work to analysts. The question was always one of credit, how the contribution would be represented upward, and what the analyst's visibility would be in the final product. Marcus had been vague about this. When I asked in our initial project meeting how the presentation would be structured and what my role in the board presentation would be, he had said, "We'll figure that out as we get closer," with the easy confidence of someone who had already figured it out and had no intention of sharing his figuring. I noted that. I began working. The analysis required 600 hours across 4 months. Not continuously. I had other work, other projects, the ordinary demands of an analyst's portfolio. But the Meridian analysis was the significant project of those 4 months, and I gave it the attention significant projects require. The framework I developed was not standard. Standard approaches to REIT portfolio analysis existed, and I had used them as a foundation, but the specific characteristics of Meridian's portfolio. its sector distribution, its geographic concentration, its debt structure. Required modifications that standard frameworks didn't accommodate. I spent 3 weeks developing a custom modeling approach that accounted for those characteristics, and then another 3 weeks testing it against historical data to confirm it was producing reliable results. When the framework finally held, I ran the full analysis. The findings were significant. Meridian's underperformance was not primarily a market issue. It was a structural issue. 3 specific allocation decisions made over the previous 2 years had produced a concentration risk that was suppressing returns and would continue to suppress them until corrected. The recommendation was specific, actionable, and supported by the modeling in a way that would withstand rigorous challenge. I was proud of it. Not in a performative way. In the quiet, specific way you are proud of something when you know exactly how hard it was and exactly how well it turned out. I sent the completed analysis to Marcus in November. He responded with a single line. "Great work. I'll take it from here." That was when I sent the email. The email had been my therapist's idea. Not specifically. Dr. Yuki Tanaka had not said, "Claire, you should email the CEO of your company with a summary of your analytical contribution to the Meridian project." She had said something that produced that action. She had said, "What would it look like to protect your work without assuming the outcome?" I had thought about that for several days. Then I had composed an email. Not to Marcus. Not to his manager. To Patricia Holt, the CEO of Caldwell Financial Group, a woman I had met once at a company all-hands meeting, and whose reputation for analytical rigor had been part of what attracted me to the firm. The email was 3 paragraphs. The first paragraph introduced me. Claire Nakamura, analyst, Marcus Webb's team, 18 months at the firm. The second paragraph described the Meridian portfolio analysis, the framework I had developed, the methodology, the key findings, the recommendation. Not the full analysis. That was proprietary and would be presented to the board by Marcus. But a clear, precise summary of the analytical approach that was specific enough to be recognizable and accurate enough to be verifiable. The third paragraph said, "I wanted to make sure you were aware of the analytical foundation of the Meridian work before the board presentation. I am proud of the framework and happy to discuss the methodology in more detail if that would be useful." I sent it on a Thursday evening in November. Patricia Holt responded the following Monday morning. Her response was 4 sentences. "Thank you for sending this, Claire. The framework sounds rigorous and the findings significant. I look forward to seeing the full presentation. I'll make sure to look for your name in the materials. I'll make sure to look for your name in the materials." I read that sentence 3 times. Then I saved the email thread. Both sides of it. Her response and my original. Saved to my personal drive. Forwarded to my personal email. Printed and filed at home. 8 weeks later, I was sitting in the 31st floor conference room watching Marcus Webb arrange my notes at the head of the table. The presentation began at 9. Marcus was smooth. He was always smooth in rooms like this. The particular ease of someone who had spent 20 years presenting to boards and had learned to perform authority convincingly regardless of the depth of knowledge underneath it. He walked through the analysis slide by slide. My slides, my framework, my findings, my recommendation. He said we several times when referring to the analytical work. We developed this approach. We identified the following risk factors we recommend. But the material said Marcus Webb. The header said Marcus Webb. The follow-up that would go to the board after the meeting would say Marcus Webb. The board members listened, asked questions. The questions were good. Board-level questions about methodology and assumptions and the robustness of the modeling under different scenarios. Marcus answered most of them, not all of them. The ones that went to the specific technical depth of the modeling. The ones that required genuine understanding of how the framework was constructed rather than familiarity with its outputs. Those questions he deflected or answered at a level of generality that was sufficient but not precise. I sat at the table and did not speak. I had not been introduced. Marcus had not indicated at any point that anyone else at the table had contributed to the work. I was present as a supporting analyst, the category of person who sits along the wall or at the far end of the table and is neither introduced nor addressed unless specifically needed. I watched Patricia Holt across the table. She was 61, silver-haired, with the particular attentiveness of someone who listens more than they speak and processes considerably more than they reveal. She had asked 2 questions during the presentation, both specific, both going directly to the methodological heart of the analysis. Marcus had answered the first adequately.
He had answered the second at the level of generality that told me he didn't fully understand the assumptions set underlying it. Patricia had nodded and written something in her notebook. The presentation concluded. Marcus invited questions. 3 board members asked follow-ups. Marcus answered them with the competent surface fluency of someone who had read the analysis carefully enough to speak to its outputs, but not carefully enough to speak to its construction. Then Patricia Holt looked down the table. Not at Marcus. At me. Miss Nakamura, she said. The scenario modeling in Section 4. The stress testing against the 2019 rate environment. Can you walk me through the assumption adjustments you made for the current debt structure? The room went very still, not dramatically. Just the particular stillness of a conference room when something unexpected has happened, and everyone is recalibrating simultaneously. Marcus turned to look at me. I looked at Patricia Holt. Of course, I said. I spoke for 4 minutes. Not nervously, not performatively. Simply accurately. The way you speak about something when you built it from the ground up and know every component and why every decision was made. The board listened. Patricia Holt took notes. When I finished, she asked a follow-up question that went one level deeper into the methodology, and I answered that too with the same specificity. She nodded once. Thank you, she said. That's exactly what I needed to understand. She looked at Marcus. Marcus was looking at me with an expression that had several components. Surprise. Recalculation. The specific quality of someone understanding that a situation has moved into territory they did not plan for. He recovered quickly. He was good at recovering. Claire has been an excellent resource on this project, he said smoothly. Her analytical support was invaluable. Analytical support. I kept my face completely neutral. Patricia Holt wrote something in her notebook. The meeting concluded 20 minutes later. Board members gathered their materials and filed out with the unhurried efficiency of people with other meetings to reach. Marcus spoke to 2 of them near the door. The social architecture, the relationship maintenance, the things he was genuinely good at. I was collecting my copy of the materials when Patricia Holt appeared beside me. Miss Nakamura, she said quietly. Do you have 15 minutes after this? We sat in a smaller conference room 2 floors down. Patricia had coffee. I had water. She closed the door herself rather than asking an assistant to do it, which told me something about how she wanted this conversation to feel. She sat across from me and looked at me directly. I received your email in November, she said. I know. I read the summary you sent. She paused. And then I read the full analysis after Marcus submitted it to my office last week. I waited. The framework in your email and the framework in the analysis are the same framework, she said. Described in your words in November and presented under Marcus's name this morning. Yes, I said. How much of the analysis did you produce? I thought about how to answer that accurately without overstating or understating. The framework is mine, I said. The modeling methodology is mine. The data work is mine. The findings and recommendations are mine. I paused. Marcus provided direction on the overall project scope and reviewed the outputs. Patricia looked at me for a moment. That's what I thought, she said. She was quiet for a few seconds. Why did you send me that email? She asked. I thought about Dr. Tanaka's question. What would it look like to protect your work without assuming the outcome? Because I wanted there to be a record, I said, before the presentation, of what the work was and who had done it. Patricia nodded slowly. That was very thoughtful, she said. It felt necessary. I said honestly. She looked at her notebook, then back at me. Claire, she said, I want to ask you something directly, and I'd like you to answer directly. Okay, what do you want from this conversation? I had thought about this question. Not just since this morning, since November, since I sent the email, since I understood what Marcus intended to do. I want accurate credit for my work. I said, in whatever form that takes at this company. I want my contribution to this analysis reflected in how I am evaluated, compensated, and considered for advancement. I paused. I am not interested in publicly embarrassing Marcus or creating a situation that harms the firm. I am interested in being accurately valued. Patricia studied me for a moment. Then she said, That is a very mature answer. I've had time to think about it, I said. She almost smiled. Give me a week, she said. I need to have some conversations. Of course. She stood. I stood. She shook my hand with the firm directness of someone who meant the handshake as a statement rather than a formality. Thank you for sending that email, she said, and for speaking clearly this morning when I gave you the opportunity. Okay. Thank you for giving me the opportunity, I said. She nodded once and left. I stood in the smaller conference room for a moment looking at the Chicago skyline through the window. Then I went back to my desk and did my work. The week Patricia had asked for became 10 days. I did not hear from her directly during those 10 days. I heard from Marcus. Twice. The first time he stopped by my desk with the easy manner of someone who had decided to handle a situation by acting as though it didn't fully exist. Good contribution this morning, he said. The board appreciated the technical depth. Thank you, I said. Patricia seems interested in the methodology. I'll probably have you present the technical sections in the follow-up meeting. I will probably have you present. As though you were doing me a favor. As though the technical sections were not the entirety of the analysis, and presenting them were not simply a matter of the person who built them explaining what they had built. Happy to do that, I said pleasantly. The second time Marcus came by my desk, he was slightly less easy. Did Patricia reach out to you after the meeting, he asked. We had a brief conversation, I said. He waited for more. I didn't provide more. Good, he said. Good. He tapped the edge of my desk twice, the gesture of someone wrapping up a conversation they initiated without knowing how to end. Great work on the project. Thank you, Marcus, I said. He left. I went back to my work. Patricia's assistant called on a Friday afternoon, 11 days after the board meeting. She asked if I could come to Patricia's office the following Monday at 9. I said yes. I spent the weekend not thinking about it, which was a discipline rather than a natural state and required the particular focused redirection of attention that Dr. Tanaka had been teaching me for 2 years. I ran. I cooked. I called my mother in Minneapolis, who asked about work, and I said things were interesting, and she asked what that meant, and I said I'd tell her when I knew more. Monday morning. Patricia's office, 32nd floor.
A corner office with 2 walls of windows and a view of Lake Michigan that was so complete it felt less like a view and more like an argument about scale. Patricia was already at her desk when her assistant showed me in. She gestured toward the chair across from her. Thank you for coming, she said. I sat. She opened a folder. I've had several conversations over the past week and a half, she said. With Marcus, with HR, and with 2 members of the board who were present at the presentation. She looked at me. I want to be transparent with you about what I've decided and why. I waited. The Meridian analysis will be formally reattributed in our records to reflect your primary authorship, she said. Marcus's role will be accurately described as project oversight and client management. I was very still. Your performance review will reflect the actual scope of your contribution to this project. Patricia continued, which means your compensation review in March will reflect it as well. She said a number. The number was significant. Additionally, she said, I am creating a new position. Senior Analyst, Strategic Initiatives. It would report directly to my office rather than through the standard departmental structure. I would like you to be considered for it. I looked at her. That's a substantial change, I said. Yes, she said. It is. What about Marcus? Patricia held my gaze. Marcus is being moved to a client relations role that better reflects his actual strengths. That decision was made for reasons that extend beyond this situation. This simply accelerated the timeline. I nodded slowly. Can I ask you something? I said, yes. Why the new position? Why not simply the reattribution and the compensation adjustment? Patricia looked at me with the expression of someone who has been waiting for a specific question and is pleased it arrived. Because, she said, someone who sends a 3-paragraph email to a CEO in November, protecting their work with documentation rather than complaint, and then sits in a board meeting and waits for the right moment to demonstrate their competence rather than creating a scene, is someone whose judgment I want close to my office. I sat with that for a moment. The email was my therapist's idea, I said, indirectly. Patricia laughed. A genuine sound. Unexpected. Tell your therapist she's good at her job, she said. I accepted the position. It was not a difficult decision. What was difficult was the conversation with Marcus. Brief, professional, in the presence of HR, during which he was told about the reattribution, and the role change simultaneously and managed both with the particular controlled composure of someone who had known this was coming and had prepared a version of accepting it gracefully. He shook my hand afterward. You did good work, he said. Thank you, Marcus, I said. We did not have a deeper conversation than that. There was nothing deeper available between us. Not hostility, not warmth, simply the accurate acknowledgement of two people who had operated in the same professional space with different ethics and were now moving in different directions. That was sufficient. I called Dr. Tanaka that evening. Patricia Holt says to tell you you're good at your job, I said. A pause. Then. Context. I told her everything. She listened without interrupting. Her characteristic patience, the quality I had valued most across 2 years of sessions. When I finished, she said, "How do you feel?" I thought about the 32nd floor office and the Lake Michigan view, and the number Patricia had said, and the folder with the reattribution documentation. Accurately valued, I said. That's new for you, Dr. Tanaka said. Yes, I agreed. It is. How does it feel? I looked out my apartment window at the Chicago night. Like something I should have insisted on sooner, I said. Yes, Dr. Tanaka said. And I'm glad I finally did. I am 29 years old, and I am a senior analyst for strategic initiatives at Caldwell Financial Group, and my work has my name on it. All of it. Every analysis, every model, every recommendation that goes upward through the firm now carries my name. Because Patricia Holt established at the outset of my new role that accurate attribution was non-negotiable, and the firm's standards would reflect that. I think about the email sometimes. 3 paragraphs. Sent on a Thursday evening in November after Dr. Tanaka asked me what it would look like to protect my work without assuming the outcome. Not a complaint. Not an accusation. Simply a record. A clear, precise account of what the work was and who had done it. Sent to the right person at the right time with the documentation attached. It cost nothing to send. It changed everything. I think about the board meeting too. The moment Patricia Holt looked down the table and said Miss Nakamura, and every head in the room turned toward me. The 4 minutes I spoke about the framework I had built. The follow-up question that went one level deeper, and the answer I gave without hesitation, because you cannot fake that kind of depth, and I had not needed to. Competence, in the end, speaks for itself. But sometimes you have to create the conditions for it to be heard. That is what the email did. That is what sending it carefully and saving the response and being prepared to speak when the moment arrived did. I did not rescue myself at that board meeting. I had rescued myself 8 weeks earlier on a Thursday evening with 3 paragraphs and a send button. The board meeting was simply when it became visible. If you are doing excellent work that is not being seen, I hope you take this forward. Document what you build. Send the record to the right person. Not as a complaint, as information. As the simple establishment of an accurate account before the moment when accuracy becomes contested. Your work has your name on it. Make sure someone who matters knows that before someone else decides otherwise. Thank you for being here today. If this story meant something to you, if you have ever done excellent work that someone else tried to claim, please share it with someone who might need the reminder.